What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Proverbial Life Podcast. This is a podcast where we encourage Christians to look to Christ, live wisely, and leave a legacy behind for generations to follow. On tonight's episode, I have a special guest with me. His name is Eric Muldrow, and Eric and I are going to be chopping it up, talking about urban communities, over-policing, and hip-hop culture. Stay tuned. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. You'll have the opportunity to ask any questions in the comment section. In the meantime, please please share this. We're also live on YouTube as well. All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, what's going on? We're back. Me and Eric. What's good, dude? So tonight, let me introduce Eric again. Eric, thank you for agreeing to be on tonight. Please introduce yourself. Let people know your podcast, where people can find you, how they can kind of join in and kind of see what you're doing with what you do, brother.
Yeah, man. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. We've been chopping it up about trying to get together for a long time, and
Right.
I'm glad we're finally able to find the right time and whatnot. But yeah, man, first and foremost, I'm a Christ follower. The Lord graciously saved me. I usually say around 2009, 2010, after living a long life of a false convert. Brother was all up in the world claiming Jesus, and man, the Lord finally got a hold of me and faced me with the reality of sin, the weight of sin on my life. And man, I'm telling you, things haven't been the same since. My life has been, he totally flipped the brother's life upside down, all to his glory.
Amen.
I'm a retired police officer. I have a law enforcement career of about 20 years, a little over 20 years. I started my law enforcement career back around 92 after getting out of the Army. I did 4 years in the Army, and I jumped into law enforcement almost right away, started working for Westville Correctional Center. And anyone who's out there familiar, Westville is around 40 miles outside of Gary, Indiana, around an hour outside of Chicago. So and it was a maximum security prison back then. So I worked there for about 3.5 years, really got my feet wet in corrections and dealing with the criminal element on a deep and intimate level. Later on, picked up my family. We moved out to Las Vegas in 1995. In 1996, I hired on with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, worked in the county jail for 10 years. In 2006, I decided I just needed to change. And so I transferred out to the police side of the house with Las Vegas Metro Police. And I finished out my career in 2014. During that time, I worked as a defensive tactics instructor, a firearms instructor, an active shooter instructor, a gang intelligence officer, a critical incident or CIT, crisis intervention team officer, where you deal with people who are in a mental health or drug-related crisis. And man, I trained a lot and got to experience a lot of pretty cool and crazy things throughout the course of that time. Over the last few years, the Lord has really started moving my heart to speak out with my experience in the area of police brutality, policing in general. And that pretty much started in 2016, where I started speaking on a more consistent basis. And officially, I started Code Red Conversations. That's where you guys can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube is where I probably put out the most in-depth content, where I address these issues, police brutality, uses of force, modern day policing, and I also discuss issues in the area of situational awareness. So I take my knowledge and my background, I try to help the average everyday citizen better be able to defend themselves and their family. And in the days and times we're living in today, that's a valuable skill and some tools to have.
Yeah,
So that's
wow.
about it, man. That's a little bit about me.
That's great, man. No, thank you. That's good. So a couple things that I was thinking of. So 20 years, I was going to ask you how long were you serving for? So about 20 years, you said?
Yeah, man, a little over 20 years, man, in law enforcement, man, in the jail, in the prison, on the streets. I
Yeah,
pretty much did it all up.
yeah. And then another thing that kind of stood out was the gang intelligence
Yes.
that you
Yeah.
were in. I definitely want to touch on that some more, and kind of give you my thoughts on that, and kind of my background
Right.
growing up. And then the other thing that stood out to me, man, was 2016. You said 2016 is really a memorable year for me, because 2016 is when I became woke, and I didn't have a terminology for that woke thing, right?
Right.
It wasn't there wasn't woke church at that time. That's kind of a new phenomenon within the past couple of years. But 2016 was big for me because we had just moved from Florida to New York, and around that time was the Colin Kaepernick thing.
Right.
And then it was when what was the cop the killing at that time?
Was that the
Was it
Eric
Michael
Garner?
Brown? It was Eric Gardner. Yeah, Eric Gardner.
Yeah.
And then coming into Michael Brown.
Yeah, those were, if my memory serves me, man, those were some of the hot incidents that were going on at that time.
Yeah. And so those and others, man, because then you had Rice, and you had who was the other individual who was
2016, we also might be looking at the Philando. Was it Philando Castillo?
I think Philando was 17.
17, okay.
But anyway, around that time,
right
around that time, man, is when and this is kind of what I want to get with you on tonight as we chop it up and we talk, is around that time, man, when I saw all these cop killings, right?
Yeah.
Everything that the media was presenting.
Right.
I didn't have this category of critical thinking, right? It was just this. I mean, look at it. The evidence is clear as day. I mean,
right.
that white cop shot that black man. He had his hands up, and now he's dead. And this always happens to us.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was really the narrative, man, that really I was like a fish in the water that bit the hook, and it just sucked me, you know?
Well, it's pretty easy too. It's pretty easy to get caught up in that, especially and you said it yourself, you didn't have that category of critical thinking.
Yes.
It wasn't because, man, I'm telling you, I used to have a similar mindset, especially being a black man in America, growing up in the 70s and 80s. Those are some very formative years for me. I didn't mean to cut you off, my man.
No, you're good, brother.
But growing up in those times and dealing with racism a lot when I grew up in New Jersey. A lot of people think that you grow up in the Northeast on the East Coast that you don't deal with racism. Man, that's nonsense, man. I can go and tell you stories of the things that we dealt with growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood. But then through the years, with my experience in the area, working in the field, it kind of swayed my opinion somewhat. But man, I'm telling you, when it came down to the area of critical thinking, that was something that the Lord graced me with as I started dealing with the issues of evolution and how the media, it's really crazy because how the media portrays, quote unquote, their evidence, quote unquote, evidence for evolution. And then, there were different ministries out there that really started helping me to inform me, like when it comes to my studies and reading. How do you interpret this data when you're seeing something and know when truth is given? But once you really start looking at it critically, you start seeing all the vague terms. It could be perceived to be, possibly, maybe. But the main headline was evidence for man lived for whatever the case may be, that we evolved from apes, whatever the case may be. But then once you start becoming a critical thinker, you start examining information. By God's grace, it helped me as time went on. Once all these different arguments and evidences started coming out in relation to allegations of police brutality, it helped me be able to better understand what the media narrative and being willing to research and try to find out what really went down.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's huge, man. Being rightly educated, and for me, man, I was a Christian for many years by 2016,
Right.
And for me, man, what really brought this whole thing, what really made me woke and like conscious, Christian conscious, which is crazy, man. Like that's an actual thing, like conscious Christianity. There's these movements now,
Right.
in the name of wokeness that kind of adheres to conscious Christianity, and what that means is that it's a recognition that it's a recognition of who you are as a person of color and predominantly like as a black man, and then also recognizing that you don't fit into this Western culture, and then also recognizing that you're aware of these things, and then you need to bring about change, right? Like this isn't okay the way that things are, and so I grew up, man, as an unbeliever. I grew up thinking that way because I was raised in an urban context, but in that context, we never trusted the cops, right? We never. I grew up, man. I went to high school, and I sat down with some God bodies and 5%ers, right? And they talked about all of that, right? All those cults, black cults, right?
Right.
And so I remember being educated in that worldview. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight is hip hop culture, how that influences young minds and people and adults. But I was woke before there was Christ in it, right? Like it wasn't Christ wokeness. So when I became a believer and kind of shed that like wokeness, it was still in me. And then it kind of resurfaced itself when I saw these things taking place, because I always identified with like, those are my people, right? Like these are my people. Like, and then when I got saved, I recognized, okay, well, theologically, these are our people. Like it's not white or black, right? It's Christian, right? Those who are in Christ, those are our people. But it was still in me. That seed was still in me with, these are my people, because we identify ethnically. We identify in the struggle. We identify, like when you walk into a store, people watch you. So identify with that, And so when all this took place, it just came right back up in me, bro. And it was, it's like I forgot. I knew how to exegete the scripture, but I couldn't rightly interpret what was taking place on the media, it was like a disconnect between being able to examine what is being given to you, and then making sure that you come out with the right assessment as a result of that information. So can you relate to that at all?
100%. And let me give you a for instance, man, because when I was a CO, corrections officer, back in working in Indiana, just chopping it up with some of the men in there, some of the brothers in there, as far as black guys, I would just talk to them, and there was a clear and distinct hierarchy or classism in the prison culture. And in the Midwest, living in Indiana, right outside Chicago, if you were black, you were like top of the line. And then everybody else kind of fell in place underneath it. But I remember distinctly, man, brother, I could tell you, it was literally like slavery times in the prison system, in reverse. Black dudes dominated, ruled, and reigned, terrorized these white dudes. I'm talking about sexual assaults, extortion. You had to pay for protection. All that went on. And I remember just having a conversation with one dude. He was a gangster disciple, pretty deep in the game. And he said, it's not like we dislike, our brown brothers or anything like that. He says, when it's all said and done, it's all about the struggle. He said, so we struggle together because dudes of Latin, Hispanic descent, they struggle. They deal with the same things that we do as black men. He says, so they have equal access and they're held in high regard. But it was like, man, come to the white dudes with the history that they had in our country, man, I ain't got no time for them. And they need to understand. And it was all about payback or that revenge. And man, it was wild. When I would tell people about it, even now when I talk about it and tell people about it, it blows their mind. People just don't understand that. Granted, that was back from 92 to 95. I don't know if the culture has changed. It went from being a maximum security prison down to a medium security prison. So I'm sure there it changed. But I don't know. But culturally speaking, I'm sure you're still probably dealing with the same issues. But when it comes down to having that element of that pride, for lack of a better terminology, that black pride or brown pride, however you want to term it, it's there's something that even today, to some degree, I wrestle with at times because of the things of the past. You know, I was sitting down reading some scripture with my mom today, and we're reading through Colossians chapter 3, and we're reminded about that old man and how we're supposed to put on the new man and how we're supposed to live, and those old things we're supposed to put away. And we were just having an open and candid discussions about how we still wrestle with the flesh at times. And there's some days where I'll watch something on TV and I'll just think, oh man, these white dudes, man, what are they thinking? Look at them, you know, and I'm thinking I got to check myself on that, you know, and I'm not justifying it at all. I hate when I think like that. But then knowing that you grew up in a neighborhood where you dealt with racism, you just walking down the street and you get called the N-word just because they can. With some of these guys that I dealt with growing up, you get mocked on the bus, made fun of, kids telling black jokes, singing songs with the N-word in it, and you're the only black kid on the bus. When you deal with that can leave scars. And those scars can last if you're not active to do things to kind of keep that in check. So, and understand, especially as believers, how all that's part of the old man. Those things we're supposed to die to ourselves. So there's even though, but at the same time, I'm very mindful of that attitude that followed me for many years. And like I said, to some degree, I still wrestle with, because I understand how destructive that is. And I see those seeds are and the fact that we have such an ugly history in our country is why it's so easy to manipulate black and brown folks in particularly, especially from a political front. It's so easy to do that because of that history. You show a white cop with his knee on the neck of a black man or shooting a black man in general. I mean, it's gotten so we've gotten so distorted in our interpretations and in our understanding that as something as evil and vile as putting your knee on somebody's neck for almost 9 minutes, we're trying to justify a dude who had a knife in his hand or had a knife and was fighting the cops. Now that dude shouldn't have been shot. That's how distorted we've gotten. And because the Satan, first and foremost, behind all of this mess, and plus all these folks out there, a lot of these individuals who are stirring the pot for their own personal gain, whatever it be, political, financial, whatever the case may be, they've gotten so masterful at doing what they're doing that all they have to do is push those buttons. And man, we're like Pavlov's dog. We're salivating at the mouth. You talk about a white cop shot a black man and anger rails up. I don't care how born again we are to a lot of people, because man, like you said, the fact that you talked about how that was such a big part of who you were, that was never something that you really dealt with. And then when you started seeing those events, those shootings, and those cops would end up killing somebody, you never questioned the narrative. You never said at that time, you didn't, I'm assuming you didn't question the narrative. You just trusted the sources they wouldn't lie to you.
Yeah, and it didn't matter. See, like when I was woke, and again, I say that saying that's where I was, so I can use that term, saying that not everybody who's woke is where I was. Everybody's
right.
on their own little thing, right? But when I was woke, it didn't matter the source. Like there was no, okay, CNN is liberal, Fox is conservative. There was none of that, right?
Right.
I didn't have those categories. I really didn't. And so but I was able to find sources that coincided with what I thought the narrative was. And it really got wicked, man. Like, I mean, the whole thing is evil, right? Because it isn't. When I say the whole thing is evil, like, as believers, when we start to kind of make we start to separate ourselves based off of race, based off of an ethnic group's history, right? And now we start to use that as kind of like a penance for them to get right with us. In order for them to be right with God, they got to make sure that they are right with us, like we're the kind of gateway keepers. That's wicked, that's evil before the Lord. But one of the things, man, like when I was in that movement, I didn't have categories of, liberal. It was, no, I'm a Christian. I believe in, loving my neighbor, and black and brown people are systematic racism is a thing, of course, duh. Like who can't see that, right? And then and really, man, it wasn't until people that loved me enough, man, to challenge me, and there were many of them, that would send me a message on Facebook private message and be like, yo, E, you bugging. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, yeah, racism exists, but like, you throwing all white people under the bus, and like, now you're bearing false witness against these brothers. And I'm like, nah, you just don't get it. You don't understand. But I guess to connect that, man, with even what we talked about was a lot of this, man. I saw this growing up in my urban community, right? And that's kind of what I want to talk with you about tonight was urban communities, over policing, and hip hop culture.
Right.
So when we talk about urban communities, why do you think it is, and it isn't limited to urban communities, but why do you think it is that in many urban communities, black and brown communities, we're so quick? I know we kind of touched on this earlier with critical thinking, but if you could give some other reasons, why do you think that we're so quick to believe a narrative that is painted to, or that is given to us visually, right, from the media, what we see on the news? Hands up, don't shoot. Like, you see all the NBA players wearing the hoodie, hands up, don't shoot.
Hoodie, like Trayvon.
Yeah, like Breonna Taylor can't, on the mask, or can't breathe. Like, but then when you look at these, but when you say, let's look at the information behind these cases, like we can grieve that another image bearer died, and if they're not in Christ, then, man, like that's what's breaking us. It's like these people died without Christ. If they died without Christ, they're separated from Him. So how can you? What do you think about that, man? Urban communities, why does it seem that we're so quick to kind of just jump on this narrative?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it again, but I can just kind of reiterate. All right, the history is just reality. It wasn't that long ago when you really look at it. Now I'm 50 years old, just turned 50 years old this year. And in my lifetime, I've dealt with racism. I was born in 1970. So I saw it, and which wasn't that far removed from the civil rights legislations being enacted. So I'm living in New Jersey, and at that time, we're in a predominantly white neighborhood, and racism was a very real thing. So you don't have to go back that far to see racism being a central part, actually being institutional, actually being systemic, where you can point to laws and laws of the land that, when you look at the Jim Crow era, when you look at all these other things that were going on, when you look at the education system, Brown versus Board of Education, all these different factors, when you can actually see that there were actually laws that were in place that were oppressive towards people of color, black folks in particular, primarily.
Yeah.
So you look at that, and then you have I'm telling you, just growing up as a black man, just if I just look at it from an entertainment perspective, and we're going to talk about hip hop as we go on, but all the shows I used to watch growing up, Good Times, Sanford and Son, the Jeffersons.
Yes.
You're constantly being reminded of the issues of the day, of the fact that you're black in a culture that does not love you, that's constantly being thrown in your face. And so if you hear that over and over again, you eventually start to believe it. Now, there was definitely a lot more truth to that back then when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The changes I've seen in my lifetime over the years have been dramatic. It's been insane. When I just look at my life, my personal life, just the way I was treated just at random compared to now, it's just it's amazing. It blows my mind. Wow. So when I hear people, and it doesn't mean to discount the reality of bigotry and racism, if we're using culture, cultural terms, it doesn't minimize the reality of it. It's still present. You will never totally eliminate that. We're dealing with sinful men. It will always be there. But when you see the changes that have taken place, you have to willfully ignore them, the reality of the changes that have taken place culturally. But getting back to the main point, when you look at TV, when you look at all the main people, man, I grew up in New Jersey, so a lot of the TV stations I used to watch were New York stations. Mm-hmm. So I've been dealing with Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. Yes. I've been seeing them cats. I started to say clowns, especially when I'm talking about Al Sharpton.
Race hustlers.
Yeah, right. Seriously. That's what they do. It's like the old term that I got a picture of Booker T. Washington over here on my wall. It's like the old term statement. I can't quote it verbatim, but when Booker T talked about those race hustlers out there who who stir the pot because they benefit from it financially. Yeah. That's what you have. And in the Black community, you are not encouraged to go against the grain and be a critical thinker. If you do, you have to deal with the Uncle Tom stereotype. You have to deal with the house N-word. You have to deal with bootlick, coon. You get called all those names if you step off the reservation just a little bit and sit back and say, well, is this really what's happening? Or is there a possibility that there might be something else? Let me give you a quick example. Hopefully I'll keep it quick.
Oh, please, go ahead.
This weekend, or a few weeks ago, I had an old friend of mine. She was a corrections officer who worked in the county jail, and she was very active in a program called Hope for Prisoners. Did you watch the Republican National Convention, for instance? Did you see the brother up there, the brother who was in prison, and he prayed to God, asked the Lord to be merciful to him when he went before the judge because
I did it. No,
he was doing a series of bank robberies. Trump, what did he call it when Trump pardoned him? Trump.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
He founded Hope for Prisoners. So I had a good friend of mine who worked with him on a pretty regular basis her last few years on the job. So she reached out to me and asked me to come and speak at a organization that deals with kids who are in the criminal justice system, and they want to kind of lead them down a good path, because pretty much I was told that the next path, if they fail this program or whatever, next path might be prison. So she asked me to come out and talk, and we hadn't spoken in a long time. So I could let her know that, some of my old views, some of the things we used to chop it up on, they ain't quite the same as they used to be. And I share with her my YouTube channel, Code Red Conversations. She watched a bunch of my videos. She was like, I agree about 95% of what you say. There's some areas we can disagree with, but she's like, I love what you're doing and the message you're trying to put out there. So fast forward to this weekend, I was supposed to go out there. This is what I was told. I was supposed to go out there and give a short presentation just to see if the material was good. So I get there, got a whole room full of people, and they're asking me questions. They're role playing. They're supposed to be pretending to be kids while I'm teaching this class. And it's about how you deal with authority and dealing with the police.
Wow.
So I'm giving my presentation, doing the best I can to role play, but they're kind of going back and forth. I wasn't prepared for that. I thought maybe I would do 5 minutes and sit down. I ended up having to do basically the whole thing. And they're going back and forth between role playing, and then some of the questions I asked don't fit the narrative of a brother living in the U.S. I'm speaking about the reality of the crime in the Black community. I'm pushing back. I'm saying, yes, cops are there is an issue. Racism is real. I say police brutality is real, but there's also issues coming from the other side. It's not just point the finger at the cops. I said we do have a crime issue within the Black community. All you have to do is look at the numbers. Don't like them, but the numbers are real. People have acknowledged them. What do we do with the fact that, and we talk about the police shootings, but what do we do with the reality that in 85 to 90% of the police shootings, the suspect was in possession of some form of a weapon? What do we do about the vast majority of times during these police shootings or deaths, the suspect was resisting, fighting, or running from the cop? Do we ignore those factors, or do we just, or do we address them head on? And the fact that I was addressing them head on caused some tension. So by the time I got done, they weren't feeling me too tough, be honest with you. Yeah. She called me later on and said, Eric, I love what you do, but they think that you're not necessarily a good fit for this program. So I'm like, hey, it is what it is. I was disappointed because I'm like, these young people need to hear these facts. They need to hear these facts. You got young men, young women in their teens who are dealing with the police. And I guess they just wanted me to come in there and just rail on the cops and just try to make them feel good. But that ain't me. I strive to follow Christ. And with that comes some responsibilities, being truth bearers. I'm not going to, if I know this information and I withhold it from you, I'm just as good as a liar. So I wanted to go in there and share these facts with them, let them know, yes, cops have a responsibility to act right and to uphold the law. But so do you as a citizen, as a citizen here in the United States. But that balanced approach and that critical approach, they weren't feeling that. Unfortunately, in the Black community, not always. I don't want to paint a broad brush, but it is what it is. There's a person with a more conservative leanings. Man, you're just basically, you just ain't no good to a lot of folks. Yeah. People just don't want to hear your message.
Wow. No, that's good, man. So many things, brother. So let me say this, man. So just to give some context again, I had a dad, is my stepdad, raised me since I was 3. You and I were talking earlier. I was born in the Bronx. My mother took me out of that as soon as she could because she didn't want me to get involved in the lifestyle that other family members was getting involved in, especially in the 80s. I was born in 82. And so growing up, in the Bronx in the 80s, that wouldn't have been good for me at all. And so we got out of there. She met my stepdad when I was 3. We moved into Queens, lived there for a year, moved to Long Island where I was raised, right? Now, my stepdad, I honestly believe this, man, is because I had a stepdad, that saved my life, man.
Man.
It saved my life because my stepdad, man, which is ironic, man, because he worked in kind of the law enforcement, area, like he worked in the courts. So he, knew police officers, knew, kind of worked with the prisons, the prisons and all that, and kind of knew the system. But he actually, my dad, man, my stepdad, he didn't like white people, and he didn't like, and I won't use the word here, but he didn't like ends.
Right.
What he would categorize as ends, and ends are different than just regular Black folk. Like ends are low lives. You know what I'm saying?
Like what Chris Rock said back in the day. All those things, right?
Yes,
you got Black folks and you got
yes, exactly. Okay, all right, cool. Thank you. Right, and so unless you live that, you don't know. You don't.
Right.
But there's a distinction between basically people who they value their possessions, they value their property, they value other people's property, right? And then you got people that they don't care, they don't care about the community, they don't care about themselves. That you gotta, you know what I'm saying? You gotta watch.
They definitely don't care about you.
No, not at all, right? And so let's talk about this idea of over policing in those kind of contexts, right? Why is it that? So let me put a bow on that. So because I had a dad, that really saved me from a lot of trouble, man. I didn't get caught up in I didn't get caught up in gangs, although I wanted to be, right? I was a pretend Crip because there were Bloods in my community, so I wanted to be the opposite, and a lot of the guys that were Bloods were some of my friends growing up,
Oh,
and so they kind of changed. Like they were playing video games 4 years ago, and now they're like gangbangers,
Wow,
so I started wearing blue, start learning the blood. But it was because of my dad, man, that I didn't get caught up in hard drugs, and that I didn't get caught up in gang life, that I didn't get I couldn't go to certain communities, especially at certain times of the night, because I knew dad was gonna get in my butt, like I was afraid of my dad. And bro, right across the street from me, my neighbor Jamel, he didn't have a dad. His mom was working 2 jobs. He was going to the block that my dad would not let me go to. And Jamel has been in and out of prison for as far as I know, man. Right. So let's talk about over policing in urban community, the lack of a father in the home. Let's talk about those 2 things first, and then we'll get into the hip hop culture. So over policing, is that a thing?
I would argue that the police go where the calls are predominant. That's what I would argue. And I think that there are numbers and data to back that up. And a point that is often missed in the midst of this whole over policing and reimagining policing and all this craziness that we've been hearing of late is the average citizen. A few months ago, I think it was in July, there was a Gallup poll that came out where they surveyed and asked Black folks what their opinion was of the police and whether they thought the police were there too much in their communities or not enough or whatever the case may be. And when it's all said and done, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of Black people living in a lot of these communities said that the police are just enough or they want more. Yes. And they wanted them.
Yes.
What's often missed in this whole debate, when you hear the talking heads, when you hear the vocal minority, the folks on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram, BLM, all these activists out there, Antifa, you're missing the person who's living in these communities. I know for a fact that we would get a ton of calls working downtown Las Vegas, working South Central Las Vegas, two high crime areas, that you get a lot of citizens who just call in or just stop you on the side of the road and say, can you have your partners come through more often? Because we got these young folks out here slinging dope. We got these people out here beating folks up, doing all kinds of gambling. I can't come out of my house. I can't come out of my apartment without these people being there. Yes. What's often missed is the reality of the people who actually live in these communities who are affected by the high crime rate. Do I think there's over policing? No, I do not. That doesn't discount the reality of police brutality. I'm not saying that police don't abuse their power in some instances. No, it isn't the vast majority. But I think that when you examine the data, when you examine the stats and the information, you'll see that the police go where the 911 calls are circulated the most, and they go where you have to sit, which is basically the same thing, where the citizens are requesting. And if you want to bring down crime in certain areas, you need law enforcement. You need strong, well-versed, knowledgeable law enforcement who have good communication skills, good investigative skills to come in there and deal with the problem. It's not cool. I mean, it's not fun, but when we have to do better at self-examination within our country, and particularly as Black folks. The idea, some people cannot believe, and you talked about having how prevalent your dad was in your life.
Yeah,
he was the male role model in your life, and all we have to do is go back and just let's look at some data. When you look at the poverty rate, when you're looking at a fatherless home, when you're 4 times more likely to be in poverty, when there's 10 times more likely struggle with substance abuse when you're in a fatherless home. Some of these stats are from, let me see what this thing says. The writing's real small. I think a lot of this is CDC. A lot of this data from CDC and the National Center for Fathering. And when you're looking at, you're 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 9 times more likely to get involved in sexual activity, 20 times more likely to end up in prison when you're in a single family home. Why is it impossible? And then let's be real. In the Black community, you had the Moynihan report back in the 60s that talked about the issue of fatherlessness in the Black community, and it was in the 20%. And that guy was railed as being racist. You fast forward that 60 years later, 50, 60 years later, it's over 70% fatherlessness in the Black community. And then I'm just reading these numbers here. I didn't make up these numbers. These are people who have been researching and studying this data for decades, clearly. If you know that there's a greater likelihood for crime that springs as a result of these fatherless homes, and then you understand that Black folks, unfortunately, within our community, if you look at the sexual revolution and the welfare state and all the things that are tied into that, and we struggle in this area, and the crime rate might be higher in these communities, but our go-to nowadays is to blame white folks. The police are trying to oppress us by going into these communities. No, the crime is real. I lived in the hood. I ain't going to sit up here and try to act like I lived in a white neighborhood as a kid, but there were times when I first moved out to Vegas, we lived in one of the worst streets, 28th Street. Anybody, especially back in the 90s, anybody can tell you who lives in Vegas, 28th Street was an area you did not want to be hanging on. I didn't know where I was moving to. It was affordable.
It's something about them numbered streets, man.
Right. Always numbered streets and letter streets. It's something right. It's just like Chris Rock said. He talked about Martin Luther King. He said, "I guarantee you, where's the Martin Luther King? There's some crime going on." That's everywhere I've ever lived.
Real. That's
real.
Crazy. Yeah.
But when you back it up and you look at these things, man, let's honestly, man, if you cannot honestly assess the struggles within you as an individual, you can't honestly self-evaluate. And then we live in a culture where, man, you get a participation trophy.
Right.
You live in a culture where it's all about self-esteem. You as an individual being elevated. I'm not saying that we should make our kids feel bad, but if we have a biblical perspective, self-esteem, if we're honest with ourselves, we know the fact that we're sinful and we still struggle. So we're living in a society that seems to be growing increasingly secular. And then we act as if there's no consequences for the lifestyles and worldview and actions that we promote as a society. When you tell people that they can when you die, there's no God. Ultimately, there's no level of accountability. Why should we be shocked when crime is rampant in our world? And then just look at these numbers I presented. And when we're dealing with these factors, but you have these social justice activists that always want to frame it as the institution is against us, instead of saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we do an honest assessment on us as a society, on the Black community, to see if we can fix some issues. And until we do that, this will only get worse.
Yeah, man. I remember Saturday night, right?
Yeah.
Music is blasting, cool, but sometimes, man, sometimes it would get really violent out. Normally it's a fight outside,
right?
Cops gotta come, but then there would be weekdays, it's like people got work the next day. So here we are, Thursday night, music blasting. It's almost like, man, growing up, there was this middle finger up at anything that had any kind of authority, right?
Absolutely.
Like bump that, right? I'm not supposed to be playing my music out loud. Come shut it down, And I don't know, like for me, man, even growing up, like I remember going into the store with one of my mans, right? One of my friends going into the store and stealing and justifying it because they stole from me. right? They stole from our people like this,
Right.
and that was my mindset, bro. Now I had a mother and father, bro. Like I had a mother and father, and so, but
Where do you think that came from?
it came from it came from a lot of different things. It came from my peers, right? So I think a lot of the peers, man, from in public school, you know, a lot of the man, I lost my virginity, bro, by being involved in relationships with people that I met at school that I never like. It was like a secret life. Like school was a whole nother secret life, right?
Right.
That my parents didn't really know. They just, you know, they just send me to school, right? So I'm getting the right things. Meanwhile, bro, I learned the most grotesque and wicked things
No doubt.
in school, man. Like some of the most wicked and evilest things that I would never ever want anyone to know. I learned in school.
Same
Right?
here, man. Same here.
Right. So my peers, entertainment. Like I grew up. I was talking to my wife about this a long time ago. Recently, I grew up on Homie the Clown. Right. I grew up on in Living Color. Right.
You and me both, man. I was older. I was in the army, but I was every weekend in Living Color. Man.
Yeah, everybody was watching the Living Color.
Every
right?
Sunday night, no doubt.
Right. So you got the Wayans brothers on there. With the homosexuals, right?
Oh yeah,
they were glorifying that joint was hilarious.
Right.
So I remember I was watching that as a kid. Like I was watching that as a kid, man. And then I was big into the what's his name? The talk show when it was the drama.
Jerry Springer.
Jerry Springer, right? So there was the Jerry Springer, there was the Bart Simpson, there was the you know, my parents didn't let me watch the Bart Simpson because I was a little younger. But
Right.
all these things back then were seeds in my soul that could be acted out in school when like there were authorities around. Like I got drunk in high school. I got high in school. You know, I was with girls cutting classes. Like,
right.
And so my teachers were my peers, and it was also the world, right? Entertainment, and then hip hop culture, right? Like that was huge.
Absolutely.
So
I think about like with me, a lot of my formative years, a lot of same things in school. You know, you're a kid. Like I was a virgin all through high school, but man, there was a lot of pressure on me, on any kid, to be sexually active. When I was in New Jersey, it wasn't really that bad. But when we moved to South Carolina, and in the hood, in the inner city,
yes,
man, let me tell you something, man. You see a girl walking around in high school all the time. Always some girl knocked up, left and right. And then you'd be made fun of the fact that you weren't being sexually active. They'd mock you, they'd laugh at you. And my parents, you know, God bless them, but they didn't graduate high school. My dad was a lot older than my mom, so he wasn't really active on a consistent basis in our lives, like, and really raising us up in the fear of the Lord and all that kind of stuff. He kind of had his own thing going on, you know, at times.
Yeah.
And so we kind of suffered the consequences of that because I wanted to be like the world. Yes. BET, video soul, video vibrations. That was my thing growing up, man. And you would see these guys, these rappers, these R&B artists out there, and they got all the women and stuff like that. Man, I wanted that. And then when I got on my own, I fell right into all that. Yes. I was trying to be that. I was living out the black stereotype, man. I was living it out hard.
Yeah, man.
So I understand what you're saying, man.
Man, it's heartbreaking, man. And man, by the grace of God, man, I don't have any STDs. I don't have any baby mama drama, but that's only by God's grace, man. Right? And so I think about all that, brother, all that we talked about, and there's so much more pertaining to all that, right? Like when I think about all that, man, how is it that we're not messed up in our communities? Like, like you can't escape it. right? Like it's
Apart
just
from the grace of God, just like you
apart,
said,
right?
you
But
can't. It's hard. Those ones that make it out, who ain't caught up with, like I said, babies at a young age, and sexually transmitted diseases, and dropping out of high school and locked up. It's hard. It is difficult. But like I said, we've been indoctrinated to believe that the only reason for this is because of the racist history in our country. But when like I said, we examined the reality of it, we were flourishing within the Black community tremendously post-slavery, right prior to the civil rights movement, before the welfare state came along. We were doing pretty dang well for ourselves. And then when those things got enacted, that dragged us down and just destroyed our community. Of course, the rampant sin in our nation and the natural tendency of the heart, to deceive and to seek after the things of the flesh, we can't help but find ourselves wanting to go down that path. But man, like you said, I know for a fact, I wish I was like you, brother. I had baby mama drama. I still got baby mama drama. And man, all because but you know what? In reality, I'm so thankful and grateful that the Lord allowed me to go through that journey. Because now when I'm talking to young men, I can use my life as an example. When I'm talking to my sons who are, teenage boys, when I'm sitting up there having a conversation, when I'm talking to my daughter, she just turned 24, I could tell her about men, the reality of a dude who ain't trying to do nothing but, get in the drawers, so to speak. If I can be a little blunt with it.
That's real. Yeah, man.
Tell her about the reality. I said, because I was that dude at one point. And she laughs about it, but now she appreciates that. Yes. Because she's like, Dad, you don't hold back. I said, girl, because I've been there. I said, the old saying, game peeps game. You bring some knucklehead in this house, and he ain't about nothing. I'm gonna figure it out just within a couple of conversations.
That's
One, because I've been there, and then for 20 years I dealt with the criminal element. Yes. Man, I had dudes running game on me left and right, man. And my job was to be a lie detector, be a human lie detector. You ain't coming in this house, and you'd have to be a master. You have to be pretty dang good to get one by me. Right. So I'm grateful. And then I could talk to the young men, my friends, some of the young men at our church, and I could say, you know what? This is the reality of that life. It's glorified in the culture, but there are consequences. I use myself as an example. Yeah, that's the financial. People act like sex is, consequence free. I said that's a lie. There's no such thing as consequence free sex. I said sex can destroy your soul. Sex can literally kill you. It can ruin you financially. It can ruin you emotionally. Yes. Of course, there's some mitigating factors. You know what I'm talking about. But I said, but we live in a society that tries to act like this. There's no big deal. I said it's a huge deal, and there's nothing to be played around with. And your best path to go down is to honor the biblical standard, how God tells us how we're supposed to live. And we do that, we're being a much better society, much better as a people. So when you deal with all these factors, you deal with the music, all these different influences out there, like you said, man, it's very challenging for anyone to be able to rise above that.
Yes.
They do it, but it's tough.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. Yeah, I when you were talking, man, I was thinking about one of the things, and I'll connect the dots with this here. One of the things that I grew up with, I don't know if this is true or not to this day. The Lord does, and He just redeemed it, man, for His glory. But when I was an unbeliever, the one of the rumors was that I'd gotten a girl pregnant, right? Right. And the next thing I found out was that she's not pregnant anymore. And I remember, this is how wicked it was, brother. Listen to this, and this is, and the only reason I mention this, man, is because I hope this helps someone. Yeah. I was glad that she didn't have the baby. One, because I wasn't sure if it was really for me, because she was one of those girls, Yeah. And so that was a possibility. But two, was it was like a child, like that's a burden, right? Like so if she aborted it, good, because who wants to deal with that burden? Wow. And I had, man, I knew friends, man, brother. I knew friends who had 8, 9 abortions, right?
Mm.
Like, I knew plenty of people like that, but this is prevalent in our communities, man.
Yeah.
And so and praise God, man. The Lord, I'm His. I'm
Amen.
saved, a new creation, growing in the grace of God, a
No
renewed
doubt.
mind, right? Like, and then even with all that, like you said, man, all the experiences that we had, all the things that we've seen other people go through, we're able to use this now as a discipleship opportunity with our own children,
No
and
doubt.
then whoever else God brings in our path providentially, right, that we could speak to, even on this platform.
Right.
But one of the things, man, that is heartbreaking is that there are people who obviously don't know the Lord, right, and are living this lifestyle, and yet and still, man, we think that our biggest problem is white supremacy,
Mm.
right? And that's the thing, racism exists,
Absolutely.
right? But how we've defined white supremacy is so squishy and play-doh, like you could just shape and mold it however you want it to be. White supremacy has lost its teeth,
Right.
right? Like true white supremacists are smiling because they're like, "Hi, can't nobody like we done blended right in, you
Right.
know, like we done blended
Absolutely.
right in this piece." And so, man, like instead of dealing with like strategizing and thinking, all right, man, we've got issues among ourselves
No
that we've
question.
got to deal with. Like, bro, let me just say this one thing, and then I'm gonna let you speak on this. I watched in my community. I watched. This is when the man had he was, you know, he had the knee on his neck.
George Floyd incident.
George Floyd. Sorry, so many of them
No,
were coming
yeah,
together.
I get it.
So the Floyd, right? They had a protest in my community, right? And at the end, an elderly man stood up. He wasn't elderly. He was older, right? He stood up. A black man. He stood up and he started saying, "I was raised in this community, and I done witnessed all kind of racism." And then he starts giving an example about his grandchildren. And listen, and this is what I thought was most interesting, bro. He said, "I know my grandchildren are knuckleheads and troublemakers, and they start fights and stuff in the community." But these cops are racist, and it just hit me, like, yo, like if you are a troublemaker,
Right.
if you have no regard for the law, and you have a confrontation with the police officer and it doesn't turn out well, that doesn't mean that the cops are racist.
Right.
It means that you're acting like an animal.
Right. Right. You're aggravating the issue. You're bringing them to you're bringing yourself to their attention.
So that's the thing with this narrative, right? It's like it gets really frustrating because now when you throw out the ability to hear a case, to judge a case, and to make an assessment based on evidence, when you throw all those factors out the window and now it's based on emotion only, it doesn't matter if you're a drug dealer. It doesn't matter if you're a gangbanger. It doesn't matter if you're causing trouble in your neighborhood. It doesn't matter because you're black and he's white. And if he's not white, then he works for a system that is white.
Absolutely.
We've got it twisted, man.
Like you said, man, they racism, white supremacy has gotten so broad, the definition, that you don't even have to be a person who actually mistreats someone based on their skin color or their ethnicity. You don't it could be, it's the system in general, or you have to have power to be in a position to be racist towards anyone else. They've morphed it and changed it to make it be such it's so broad, so they can basically throw it at anybody and it's going to stick, even unless you're a quote unquote ally, unless you're one of those. Yes. But apart from that, even if you say I'm not a racist, that's in turn being racist. Yeah, we've gotten so far away, man. It's just really sad.
It is. So man, brother, what are some solutions, man? Like I, I say that I have an answer, and it's unfortunate that answer isn't sufficient. But I'd love to hear,
Right.
um, maybe just some real practical stuff, man. Like maybe for you, brother. So you're a former police officer. You were involved in gang intelligence and all these different like departments and spheres,
Yeah.
right? So like in my community, man, if you could speak to some of like if you could speak to the sheriff of my community, if you could speak to different police officers, boots on the ground, who are in the streets, who see what's going on, and who they're hearing the voices of the people in the community who feel like their voices aren't being heard, and they feel like racism is a thing, and all that. If you, from your perspective, could speak into that, what would you tell the sheriffs and the police officers across the board?
Man, I would just tell them to be bold, which I do. Be bold with the truth. You're going to hurt some feelings. You're going to hurt and know your information. I know there are a lot of people that don't like stats and statistics and numbers and things like that. But every one individual encounter, the fact that some people have a story, how they were treated, that's part of that makes up data. That makes up information. Let's be real. If someone has been mistreated by the police, let's acknowledge the reality. If that is true, if that is the case, let's not acknowledge that reality. But let's also remind them that that's not every police officer. Let's bring them to the reality that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of approximately 1 million to 2 million police officers here in the United States who conduct somewhere in the neighborhood. I saw a recent report that had the number like at 375 million contacts with the public every single year. That's almost 400 million contacts. 2 million police officers, roughly, making nearly 400 million contacts with the public every single year. And we take last year, for instance, and I think the year before was similar, resulting in 1,000 individuals being shot. Let's understand who we're dealing with. We're dealing with people. We have what percentage is that of contacts that actually end where someone violently, that end in someone's death? That's a very low number. And then let's back up and say, so you tell me that every time a cop has an interaction with somebody, because BLM loves to throw that number out there, the cops still kill 1,000 people every year. Yeah, because there is evil out there. Now I'm sure some of those contacts, some of those shootings are poor shootings, unjustified shootings. Sure. But now in the day and age that we're living in, with body cameras and everyone recording everything, if a bad cop is out there, he's going to get caught, more than likely. Eventually, he's going to get caught. We tell the citizens to, you got to trust the system, because you got to know, you got to be able to report information. If you have a bad cop that you're dealing with, go to internal affairs, make a complaint. No cop, take it from me, no cop wants to go to internal affairs. You go there, you make a complaint. If he's a problem, you're not going to be the only time he's demonstrated that. More than likely, there's going to be someone else. And if everyone is honest enough to say, hey, we're dealing with somebody who's a problem, people are going to start watching them. I've seen cops go to prison. Yeah. I know dudes that are friends of mine get locked up. I've seen cops get locked up, go to jail. I've seen cops get terminated, lose their job for abusing their power. It happens. The public, you don't see it on TV normally because it ain't reported. All some of these folks want to see is bad stuff, and they want to keep us pissed off, keep us, excuse my language, keep us angry in the midst of all this stuff. So backing up to your original question, when you're dealing with sheriffs and police officers, instead of these dudes kowtowing and bowing down and kneeling and laying on the ground like they did during the George Floyd incident, and that thing was vile, it was evil, it was sickening. It was troubling. It still troubles me when I think about it. But as we went on, we find out there's a lot more information, things that went on behind it. It wasn't simply as black and white as we made it out to be. But it still doesn't justify that tactic. I still think that I was a defensive tactics instructor. There's no way I would have ever done anything like that, unless if the guy was posing a deadly threat. Maybe then I would have done something along those lines. But You have too many weak officers out there and weak sheriffs and police chiefs who are afraid of angering people.
Yeah.
They'll fire people. They'll fire guys who shouldn't get fired. You need to stand your ground, support the police officers, remind the public the fact that, man, I'm telling you, I say this all the time. People like it. Some people hate it. But there's not that many individuals who put their lives on the line on a basically daily basis by going into these urban communities than the cops. How many people you know are going to put their life on the line for someone that they don't know, other than a soldier? You know what I'm saying? But on a daily basis, cops go in, white cops, brown, black, yellow, red, going into these communities, putting their lives on the line, dealing with crime, making millions of arrests every year in order to try to make these communities better. Man, like I said, back your men. If you're a sheriff, if you're a guy in charge, back and support your men. If you're somebody in the public, if you're a citizen in the public, be willing to do a self-examination and an honest assessment of various communities and see if there are issues there instead of always pointing the finger. It's okay to look elsewhere, but we also need to look within to be able to do a proper self-evaluation, self-examination, so we know whether there's some issues that we need to take care of and fix.
Man, that's good, brother. Yeah, that's good, man. That's important. Yeah, one of the things I've seen in my community is that the Black Lives Matter kind of coalition over here where we live is they want more colored or people of color officers, and it's just crazy, man. And this is where I think. Obviously, man, the unbeliever needs Christ.
Right.
And then even Christians who would even advocate for that thinking need discipleship, because to think that, like our sinful nature is kind of minimized or increased based on a person's pigment of, color of skin.
Thank you.
It's just mind blowing to me, man. There are black cops that kill white people. It happens very often. It isn't something that's uncommon. There are, there's all these scenarios, right, that you can put together, mix and match, and there's a case for it, right? And so to think that having a black cop in a black community is going to reduce the crime in the area, or is going to reduce the negative interactions between the people in the community and the cops. If the cop is going to be, adhere to the law and he sees people breaking the law, then it doesn't matter the color of his skin if he's going to uphold justice.
Absolutely. And using that analogy, using that logic that these folks use, places like Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore, Detroit, when you have a very large number of black officers, their crime rate should be low.
And is
that the case?
Highest. Yeah.
Right. Is that the case? And then we had an African American recruitment council here with the Las Vegas Police Department. I think they still have it, but I was on the board. And they would, and one of the biggest things was, it's just not culturally acceptable to say that you want to be a cop as a black man in a lot of communities. You're looked upon. You can work in the jail, you can work in the prison as a CO. That's not so bad. But to say that you want to be a cop, why are you trying to lock us up, brother? That's the kind of talk that you get. That's the kind of rhetoric nonsense that you get. Oh, you trying to sell out? Are you trying to be like the white man, locking us up? You get that all the time. So you already have a pool that's small because we're the minority community. We only make up 13% of the population, let alone the fact that we keep our numbers down. When you were talking about the abortion and things like that, but between the homicide rate and between the abortion numbers, the black community ain't never going to grow. It'll never grow. It'll be in a deficit before you know it. So you take all those things into consideration. You take the fact that it is not popular to say that you want to be a cop. Where are you going to get? Why are we assuming that you're going to be able to find a a solid talent pool, so to speak.
That's right.
Where are you going to get these guys from? Because you want a higher standard. You want people to be who demonstrate good character,
Integrity,
and integrity, and mental stability while you're out there. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot. All these things sound good, but when you try to actually apply it,
right?
Like I said, if that was factual, all these communities, some of these communities that I mentioned would be some of the best. There would be no complaints of police brutality. Crime rate would be lower, and unfortunately, that's not the case.
No, that's real. So in my community as well, there's a high population of Puerto Ricans, right? And the Puerto Ricans in our community are they're characterized as troublemakers, you know, and so it gives this it gives anyone who's Puerto Rican a bad look, right? So I'm Puerto Rican, and so that I'm lazy, you know, I'm a troublemaker. That's kind of the philosophy behind, you know, the worldview behind Puerto Ricans. Now, why that's not in a vacuum is because they come to our community and there is an entitlement, right? So like when they come here, and I'm gonna connect the dots. The high school students, because I work with the high school students in town, they don't want to go to school. Like they refuse to go to school. And so they're missing too many days of school. They don't want to learn the language. They don't want to learn English when they come from Puerto Rico. And so they kind of stay in their little silos amongst themselves, right? And they're not graduating, and then they're having children, right? They're getting pregnant, having children, and now they become dropouts. But then in one of the meetings that we were in, I said, one of the teachers said, you know, racism is the problem, you know, because there aren't enough teachers of color, and the teachers of color are being racist. So I raised up my hand. I said, tell that to the one Asian kid in the whole school who graduated with honors.
Right.
Who's right here. I said that in the meeting. I said, this is the only kid in our school. He's Asian, right? The only Asian kid in our school who graduated with honors, and his entire family is in Korea, right? So you're telling me that all these Hispanic kids, right, are not succeeding because of racism?
No.
No. So like, and I got a little testy in that meeting, man, because how we're not helping people, man, when we make excuses and we make up again, everybody. I'm not saying this is all Hispanic people. I'm not saying this is all Black people, right? But like the cultures, man, that we see developing in our communities, we got to stop with the BS, man, and we got to just be straight up real and say, nah, man, yo, stop lying, bro. Like, go to school, stop having sex before marriage, right? Come to the Lord Jesus Christ, right? Like, but we take all that out, man.
Get a job, all that.
Get a job, save money, like get off, man. And I don't want to curse, bro, but like get off your phone. You know what I'm saying? Like, read a book, like, come on, man, like, stop.
Man, you nailed it, man. It's all about excuses. It's justifying bad behavior. And we will never get, when we make all these different excuses and like you said, the example you used with the Asian kid in your school, man, they have a different culture.
Yes.
They have a different mindset when it comes to education. When we talk about Black folks, every time I go to Walmart or somewhere, go to a pharmacy, maybe not every time, but the vast majority of the time when I go to the pharmacy, I see a Black pharmacist. And usually they're from Africa or somewhere like that. And why is it? And there have been many times where, as a officer, I took inmates from the county jail. I took them to local doctors or attorneys. I saw a lot of people from like Nigeria, different parts of Africa, here in America, here in the States, been here 5 years, 10 years, become successful.
Yes.
Why is that? Because they have a different mindset. They're not inundated with a worldview, a perspective that tells you that no matter how hard you try, the system will always keep you down. That's what you get. I heard it all my life. You got to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as the white man over there in order for you to be successful. Now, if that's the reality, I see why some kids throw their hands up and they go the easy route and they go about trying to sling dope or something. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but you can see how someone who doesn't know the Lord would be easily lured down that path.
Yeah,
it would be easy. But when you're constantly being told that by these race hustlers, and even some people who honestly believe that they're doing a good thing, they honestly think that they're doing good, but they're instilling a mindset that tells you that in the Black community. I'm not sure what it's like in your community, brother, but I was told in school when getting good grades, oh, why are you trying to act white?
Right.
Why are you trying to act white? Why are you trying to be white? Why are you trying to be like them white boys?
Right.
And then you hear that enough, you stop trying because you want to fit in. Right. Like, that's why I'm such a huge advocate of homeschooling nowadays. If I had little ones and I had to go take them to school again, there's no way I would take them to the public school system.
Yes.
Based on a lot of things that we talked about earlier, the temptations and influences, peer pressure coming from all different ways. But man, that's what we were dealing with. And the sad part is almost no one is addressing that issue. And there are too many brothers in the church who sit back and they know the reality of this. But this is things that we talk about just between us.
Right.
We talk about it between ourselves. We don't let white folks know our problems. That's what we do. In the meantime, our silence is adding to our own destruction. We got to do better. We got to rise up above that.
Yeah. I guess that's the real silence is violence, right?
No question. No doubt.
Yeah, man. So, brother, this has been so good, brother. There's so much to talk about. Eric and I just said tonight we're going to have a conversation about these topics and just kind of see what the Lord does with it. And so, brother, I appreciate you, man. Again, please follow my brother on his YouTube channel, Code Red Conversations on YouTube. And man, so much to say, brother. One of the things, man, as a father now, I have 3 children, been married now for going on 12 years. And I see, man, that aside from obviously living a life that seeks to please the Lord, loving my wife like Christ loved the church,
right.
I see my mission, my calling is to train my children in the ways of the Lord. And one of the things, brother, that I see, I look back oftentimes and think about the influence that my stepdad had on me. And his influence on me was really passive. It wasn't intentional, right? So right. It was almost like what I learned kind of like in passing, right? And so but I learned a lot. Like now as an adult, I look back, I learned a lot. So now recognizing what I learned in passing from my dad, because my dad, we didn't go to church, we didn't learn about the Lord, but now, brother, as a father, man, brother, it's by God's grace, man, and this is really what I want to instill in my children, and Lord willing, man, as I get the opportunity to disciple other men that are fathers, about being intentional about teaching your children the truth about God first and foremost. My dad taught me. He says, "This is just basic." My dad say, "Edwin, you always leave the house with your ID and clean drawers." That was my dad's motto, right? He said, because he says you don't ever want to get into an accident or something. You don't got no clean drawers on. They need to know who you are and they need to know where you live, right?
Right.
And they need to make sure you have clean drawers, right? And so growing up, man, I always knew you always got to have your ID on you, right? Always carry your ID with you. Okay, so that is still the sense of responsibility, right? This is you're steward over this. He never used that language, but now, man, as a father, right, being able to look my son in the eye, my daughters in the eye, and say, "Look, this is wrong, or this is right, and this is why it's wrong, because this doesn't glorify God.
Amen.
And this is where in God's word it says that it doesn't glorify God. And this is actually good that you're doing this. This is actually, my son said the other day to me, brother. He says, Papi, why is it that adults like they don't make any mistakes? Like I can't wait one day when I don't make any mistakes. And and brother, man, praise by God's grace, brother. I saw that, man. This is a discipleship opportunity.
Absolutely.
This is a open up the Bible 101, right? And just walk through sinfulness of man, sanctification, trusting, right? So like we need that, brother. We need fathers to help disciple fathers so that they can disciple their children, but we got to deal with truth. We got to deal in reality. We can't let this stuff just trickle by, bro, and just let it, give a blind eye to it. Otherwise, man, we generation after generation is going to see what we've been seeing this entire time, man.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you summed that up well, man. When it's all said and done, it goes back to God's word, and those of us that the Lord has entrusted with as the role of disciple, being like in discipleship, whatever role that may be, being responsible enough and being loving enough to step up, whether as a parent or whether it's in our local church or whether it's with some friends, whatever aspect that the Lord has allowed you to be in, man, taking that challenge, stepping outside of your comfort zone and ministering to other brothers and helping to raise them up and become to duplicate themselves, duplicate yourself, so we can see the impact of the gospel. Most importantly, to save souls, but we can also see the impact on a culture.
Yes, yeah, no, that's
good. You
summed
it up well, man. You said it perfectly.
Thank you, brother. All right, man. Well, let's close, man. Any final words, brother?
Not really, man. It was a good time. I appreciate it. Anyone out there who ever comes in contact with the police and it's not a positive one, the best advice I can give you probably is comply.
Yes.
Comply, doing what the cop tell you, ain't being a punk, ain't being weak. If you're dealing with a good cop or a bad cop or an indifferent cop, whatever the case may be, if you want to increase your chances to being able to make it home, to see your family, do what you're told. Don't get slick. Don't try to run. Don't try to fight. Do what you're told, and you will exponentially improve your chances of making it out there and not ending up on somebody's CNN broadcast looking crazy or being them showing your high school picture trying to make you look innocent. Do what you got to do. Do what you're told. And even before that, live a righteous life. Stop living like a fool. If you're going to be out there and if you're out there in crime, doing things you ain't got no business doing, turn to Christ, repent and believe. Brother or sister, whoever's out there, because whatever life you're living, there's nothing there but emptiness and destruction that meets you in the end. Repent and believe the gospel, please.
Man, brother, that's so good, brother. Thank you, man. That's real, man. We could talk about that right there, brother. Man,
we got to do a part 2, maybe, man.
we need healing, bro, and we need healing. We talk about trauma training and all this stuff, right? And again, I don't want to knock anybody who's experienced trauma anything like that. Those are real things with people. I think a lot of times it's manufactured, right? And I say a lot of times, in many cases, it's manufactured. It's like you got a headache, don't you? Like you really got a headache. Yeah, I do got a headache. Kind of thing with the race hustlers and all that.
Absolutely.
But man, the healing that we need that supersedes any kind of psychiatric or physical healing is, man, spiritual healing, man.
Amen.
And like you mentioned, brother, that can only come from the Lord. And salvation is a free gift given to sinners who turn from their sin and trust in Christ alone. And the neat thing about Christ, man, is that when he changes your heart, right, when he gives you a new heart, and now you're born from above, not only does he make your soul right, but he makes your mind right. Like
Absolutely.
he start when you become a Christian, you now begin the process of renewing your mind, right? So now you go to God's law and you look at his word, and it teaches you how to act, right? It teaches you how to live in a way that pleases God. And right, if you stole, what did Paul say? If you stole, now you don't steal anymore,
Absolutely.
right? Now you give back. Now you contribute. Now you're value. Now you're a valuable asset to your community. So man, come to Christ, turn to Christ, believe on Christ. So I'm gonna end it there, brother, because like I said, we could keep going there, but
No
I'm
doubt.
gonna shut up.
That's good though, man. That's
Oh
good.
man, yo, Eric, man, I love you, bro. Thank you for this, brother. It's long overdue.
Absolutely, man. Love you too, my man. I appreciate it. I enjoyed this conversation, man. Just us chopping it up on the just the way things are, man. And like I said, I know we stepped on a few toes and we said things that make a few people feel uncomfortable. But I hope that our love for all communities came through during the course of this our discussion here, and our true sincerity in seeing people just come to the reality of these issues that are burdening our society today, and being honest enough to do a strong self-examination, man.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for those who are tuned in, those who are watching on YouTube. Shout out to y'all. Thank you for those of you who are on Facebook as well. We're going to end here. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a comment below. You can reach out to Eric or I on our Facebook pages, or also on our YouTube channels. Again, Eric is on YouTube as Code Red Conversations, and me, you're watching here on the Proverbial Life. So, all right, y'all. Till next time. This is a Proverbial Life podcast, the podcast where we encourage Christians to look to Christ, live wisely, and leave a legacy behind for generations to follow. Till next time, y'all. Grace and peace.